The AP has just released its preseason poll. You got number 21, Virginia Tech, number 22, West Virginia squaring off opening weekend. Tom Herman, largely on the strength of his new locker rooms, has Texas back in the poll. How about that at 23? You got Charlie Strong, the former Longhorn coach, doing Texas 4 better. He's got South Florida at 19. Miami in the preseason poll for the first time in 7 years. Jim Harbaugh's Wolverines there at 11. Let's go 1 through 10 now. And yes, Alabama, the runner-up last year, number 1. The Tide, of course, opened the season against Florida State, which is number 3 in this poll. The first time that the preseason number 1 has ever opened the season against a top 3 opponent. Ohio State at 2, joined by 3 other Big Ten teams in the top 11. Speaking of being joined, we're joined by the College Game Day host, Rece Davis, who will be in Atlanta next weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
College Game Day will be there for that monster kickoff to the college football season. You are a voter in this poll.
I am.
When you say it laid out 1 through 25, what stands out to you, Rece?
I think the balance among the conferences, and I believe anyway, the real separation from the top 3 to the rest.
A shelf there?
Yeah, there's a shelf there, and there are a couple of teams that could step up to that. I guess Southern Cal, Clemson certainly can if it can find a quarterback. Those are the 2. But I think there's, at least in terms of number of questions about teams, fewer questions about those teams that are ranked 1, 2, 3. I had those teams 1, 2, 3. I had Florida State 2. The only difference, but I mean, you're splitting hairs. It doesn't matter. Those 3 teams to me have fewer questions than anyone else.
Seemingly every year, no matter how good the pollsters are and the voters are, we see a team that's outside the top 25 that makes a run and becomes at least in the conversation for the national title. Last year, Penn State, Wisconsin, both right outside of the rankings to start the year, both finished in the top 10. Do you have a team that you could see maybe doing something similar?
I think there are teams that can impact the race, but the number 1 team I would have said, David, would be TCU. But TCU's road schedule in conference is brutal. They're at Kansas State, they're at Oklahoma, they're at Oklahoma State. You know, if not for that, the TCU, which I believe was, they were the first team among others receiving votes, they would have been the team that I would have said, watch out. A little bit of a down year last year. Patterson rarely has 2 consecutive down years, a lot of pieces coming back. I would say that I don't know about any other team that's unranked that could make that type of run, but I think in the year of the quarterback, if any of these teams ranked around 15 to 20 can answer positively their quarterback questions, Georgia, Florida, Miami, if those teams can answer their quarterback questions positively, they could make a run and have an impact on the race.
Okay, we will look for that. We have David Pollack now joining us from Athens, Georgia. David, we've seen the top 25 now, the preseason poll. What stands out to you about what you're seeing there?
Well, I think there's a couple things to note. I don't think anybody's surprised that Alabama's number 1. I think where Wisconsin's positioned right now is very interesting because I think you're going to see Wisconsin at some point in this season in the top 4, probably in the top. I mean, at one of those committees when they look at their schedule. I mean, where is there a loss for them until November 18th? Where is there a challenge for them? Going to be very interesting to see them because when those schedules start getting released and the committee starts meeting, are they a team that's already in the top Final 4 without having proven much, without having possibly beaten a ranked team on their schedule? So that was, to me, was something that stuck out. A lot of respect, obviously, for Clemson. I think rightfully so with what they lost with Deshaun Watson and all the offensive weapons. But the polls, they're fun to look at. The Big Ten having 4 teams in the top 11. But this is always a time of year that everybody goes, why do we have a preseason poll? Because me and Rece and David, we get to get together and we get to talk about it. So I'm happy.
That's exactly right, David. The big thing I want to see, David, is voters, and it doesn't matter as much as the playoff selection committee, but they should move teams around. Just because right now I think that Alabama and Florida State and Ohio State have separated. If I watch them play 2 or 3 weeks, and that's not the case, you got to move them. I mean, you drastic movements early.
Isn't
That's
there
what
a
you want to
bias
see.
against it? We're talking about, well, it doesn't mean that much, but a lot of times you feel like you have to jump over a team because of where you're slotted in that poll.
But you shouldn't.
You shouldn't,
that's
but
the thing.
you do.
That's not a function, in my judgment, of having a preseason poll. That's a function of voters executing their jobs properly. So it doesn't have to be that. You need to be able to evaluate what you see. Right now, we're evaluating what we know and what we suspect. A little bit of an art more than a science, but you need to be willing not to try to validate your predictions, but to reflect what you see.
And I think, Rece, I think people have done a better job over the last several years of accomplishing that. It used to be like, no, you win, we can't move you. I think now you're starting to see guys like Rece that are smart enough to realize that, like, listen, we don't have it all pegged before the season. And, yeah, so-and-so might have 17 returning starters, and they look really good, but for some reason it's not clicking and it's not going well. You gotta have the right to go, okay, throw that out. What am I seeing with my eyeballs right now? When I watch them on tape, what do I see? When I watch them play, what's the things they do well? What's the things they don't do well? And I think we've done a better job of that over the last several years.
Rece, when you voted, obviously you were probably a little bit different than what the poll is. Was there a team that finished up in the top 25 that you thought was ranked too high?
In this one,
Yes.
the new one's out, I understand the respect for Tom Herman and the new locker rooms, as you said. I didn't have Texas in my top 25. I didn't have Tennessee in my top 25. I had TCU, Northwestern, and I had North Carolina State also in my top 25. I'm not sure they're complete enough to influence championship races, but their defensive front, which is probably second most important behind a quarterback in terms of position. They're all seniors, and as David said, they're filthy. I have NC State ranked, but, those are quibbles. I didn't have them ranked in the top 15 or anything. These are all teams I had ranked, somewhere in that 18 to 25 neighborhood.
David,
what about
when you start getting to the bottom of the top 25, bro, it's like throw a dart.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exceptionally hard. I mean, Rece talked about TCU. You could put them in there. I think Notre Dame's a team that's going to be, at some point, you're going to start seeing them in the polls. I think they'll have a pretty good bounce back season from what they did a year ago. But when you get down to the bottom of that top 25, there's not a lot of difference between 25, 24, 23, and 35.